Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Shift with Lena Agar podcast. In this session, I had an incredible conversation with Sanela Lukanovic. We dove deep into the pitfalls of perfectionism and leadership and how it stifles creativity and innovation. We also highlighted the struggle of leaders to let their teams experiment and fail. And Sanela also talked about the importance of self-compassion in managing perfectionism. We explored how negative self-talk impacts our self-worth and how comparing ourselves to others can be detrimental. So this session was really packed with insights on balancing excellence and self-care, and I'm really excited for you to hear it. So tune in, as always, comment, share, subscribe, and let us know what you think. Sanela, welcome to the Shift podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So before we dive into kind of the different topics that we're going to be covering today, tell my audience a little bit more about why they should stick around for the next 30 to 45 minutes. What are some things, tell me a little bit about your career story and what do you what inspired you to be on a podcast to begin with?
Let's start with who I am, maybe, or what I do, and that could inspire people to say. So I am an executive coach. I run my own business and I work with driven and wholehearted leaders who want to overcome perfectionism, self-criticism, and find the confidence to lead and live with courage and purpose. So that's kind of the essence of what I do. But I kind of didn't come, this is not my first career, I didn't come to this point in a straight line. Mm-hmm. You can say that I've done lots of shifting and course correcting over the years. But I think I knew from maybe when I was 12 that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with people, and I always wanted to understand people, what makes them tick, what why people do things they do, why people say one thing and don't, and do it another. But when I had a choice, my first choice to get on that path towards that career, when I was choosing my university, you know how it's like when parents kind of give you advice and stuff, like I was told that you can't have a living out of with psychology degree, like it's better if you do economics or something like business related. So that's what I did. So I chose economics, and then I had another point in my life when I could course correct that. So when I came to England, I had a chance, but I didn't take it because I was too worried that, to get to the good university, do a good degree, have a good job. And then straight from university, I went to management consulting in London. And again, all this time I'm thinking, this is all about people, it's about business transformation. I love people. I like, that's my jam. And I loved it. I really enjoyed the project work, and I kind of got myself a reputation that I'm somebody who can work with, quote unquote, difficult people. I could work between the business and the IT guys. I could sort of talk to leaders who are a little bit reluctant to what we were, transforming business into, etc. But that wasn't my zone of genius. It was a job, right? And then by accident, when I was in a gym on a bike, that was back in early 2000. I found this article about life coaching, and I was like, I'm doing it. This is finally I can get on this path that I knew I wanted to take when I was 12. And that's where I started. I started that transitioning between, having a good career, well-paid career, into something that I really loved and cared so much about. This is, I think I'm now in the place where every day, whatever I do, whether that's working with, one-to-one, whether it's in groups, whether I'm creating stuff, I love it. I genuinely love it. So it wasn't a straight line. I kind of eventually got there. And that transition also took time. So I know a lot of people, you work with, career, you advise people on career journeys, and they're transitioning from one place into something else. It's a hard work, and it's not that easy. So I think that's probably the nutshell. And maybe we can talk about transition or wherever you want to take it, but
Yeah.
that's what I do.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I was a kid, I remember around that age, like 11, 12, I wanted to be a teacher. Like that was my whole thing. I wanted to be a secretary and then I wanted to be a teacher, which is really strange, but I'm always amazed at because I'm really organized and I really like to have like the organization piece and then I really want to like create content and share knowledge, like whatever I'm learning. And it's interesting because it took me also a zigzag for many, many years before I actually ended up in the talent development field. But it's interesting how often when we're younger, our natural tendencies are to kind of go towards the things that we enjoy. And then through university and early careers, we're just kind of stumped on. And then we're just kind of like pushed into all these careers that are supposed to make us money, which sometimes they don't even anyway. And then we get into this mindset of like self-doubt because we're so confused because our innate self maybe asks one thing, but then what the world is telling is the other thing. And then we become adults and then we come to see people like you and say, I have issues with self doubt or we're too perfectionist because we're so afraid. So talk to me, let's dive into that because I think that is something that is so relevant for a lot of people, and especially now when opportunities are vast and it's like you can just pretty much be anything you want to be if you really wanted to, but it's also that's stressful. So how do you work with clients and like what happens, how does one get out of this mindset?
Mm. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I definitely connect with that. And when you were talking about this true self or the young self who knew and was connected with what we wanted and our kind of innate talents, our innate strengths, um, with the world telling us what to do, and because we look and watch the world. Um, and we are trying to please the world. So this is how you kind of start constructing yourself into this perfectionism, into this um, perfect edition of you that is based on what you've collected as evidence that people want from you. So that was, for example, that I bumped into that as soon as I left corporate culture. Corporate, where in school and the corporate culture, you are actually given quite strict, like a roadmap, with the tick boxes. This is what you need to do. This is how you need to look. This is how you need to talk. This is how you need to, behave. And if you do all of those things, you'll achieve success. Now, when you come out or when you get to the senior level in your career, or you leave that corporate world, I realized only then that actually I have this persona, my who I thought that I needed to be to succeed, in order to be valued, in order to be seen as clever, in order to be seen as somebody who can add value. That person. That I worked so hard on constructing that I lost contact with myself and who I was, and it was really when we are kind of driven only but by expectation of that others have on us, we actually are constantly guessing, and therefore there is no sense of. We are constantly guessing, and the people are responding to that version of us, right? So when actually, I remember when I was in corporate world, and I would kind of do all the right things. At the end of the project, I would get, I would sit down to talk about the appraisal, and I would always get really, really good appraisals. Do you think that made me happy, or that made me think like, oh my God, I'm amazing? It didn't. It didn't, because in my head, I didn't know it then. I only figured that out once I started working on once that perfectionist mindset kind of started tripping me up. But then I just, I would be kind of happy for a very brief period, kind of almost I would be more like, oh, phew, I dodged the bullet. Like, I'm glad that, they liked what I did. Solely because who I was putting out there and who I was behind that perfectionist armor, if you like, were two different people. So all the praise was going to this out, the person we are putting outside, but not the one who is hiding behind that armor, if that makes sense. So it's really hard when we disconnect from when we kind of just have when we have this disconnect between who we are and what the world wants from us. And the longer we carry it, the heavier that armor is.
In my work with like career change seekers, I often see this comparison. So we tend to compare ourselves to other people, and I'm guilty of it through majority of my life so far. Probably into my early 30s, I was like consider myself not smart enough, not strong enough in certain areas, because I kept comparing myself to the other successful people that are out there, or anybody who had a skill that I didn't have. I felt it's almost like it diminished any skill that I had. And I see this a lot with career change seekers in particular. It's like, well, I haven't done this thing, so I must not be good enough for that job, for that business, for whatever it is. And it's this like self-doubt. And I think that, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but it's like, what happened? Like, what is it that drives us to that? Like you've kind of started to dive into it, but can we go a little bit deeper into, like how do we fix? I don't know if fix is the right word, but how do we overcome that? Not fix, but overcome.
I think, first of all, I think it's natural for us to compare ourselves to other people. We are social creatures. We are relational to other people. So we want to make sure, in a kind of really, if we go back to the caveman, we want to make sure that we are with the right crowd, that we are in the right, on the right level, that we are useful to our group, so that the group does not forget about us or leave us, outside the cave to be eaten by, whatever. So it's one, kind of we need to accept that, yes, I'm always going to have my eye on, who do I admire, or who do I like, what I'm aspiring towards. In that sense, we'll compare. We'll compare our lives, we'll compare our careers, our relationships, how much we have, how much you have, etc. Yeah, that is okay. I think that's just human, human. Where it gets difficult and where it starts costing us, when that comparison is actually, so I'm looking at you and I'm making up a story about myself that I'm not good enough. That is a problem. So it's not that I'm looking at you and saying, wow, she's doing this amazing podcast. I'm not doing a podcast. That's a really cool thing to do. I wonder, how can I do that? Right? So I'm looking up to you and kind of figuring out, I would really, understanding that actually that's something I want to do. But what most of us do, when we start making these negative stories about ourselves, that is when it starts to cost us. I mean, what I like to do, if I get myself into this, I mean, I have worked so much on this, and you're right to kind of say that comparison and perfectionism go well, together. And then self-criticism comes, and then we can kind of talk about that. But what I do when I see that I'm actually thinking a little bit too much about what other people are doing, then let's say that I look at you and that you're doing a podcast, and I'm kind of making stuff. Well, I'll never do that. I'll never, I just can't do it. I'm not articulate enough. I'm not organized enough. I'm not clever enough. Blah blah blah. Yeah. The best thing to ask yourself when you notice that you're comparing yourself is just to say, do I really want this? Is this something that, I aspire to? Like, if I see you with the two pools and Rolls Royce in front of your house, do I really want that? And then the second thing, would I really want to work hard to get it? And then it becomes kind of a sense of like, okay, I compared myself, I was a little bit jealous. Is that something really useful to me? Is this something that I can use for my development, for my career direction or whatever? So that's those kind of two things. How to use comparison, how to accept it, that it is a natural thing to do, that we can use it as a positive thing, as a kind of a window into something that we want but we don't have at the moment. And then the second bit is about what do we do with these stories when we start making them up about ourselves and our inadequacy, and when we notice that actually that is stopping us from progressing. So what do we do with that? That is a kind of different thing. Did I answer your question a little bit about?
You did. I actually really like the point you made about like when you were comparing ourselves to like, why do I want to do this? Right. And then am I willing to work hard to, because, like you probably could reach certain levels, in comparison to other people as well. But it's like, do I actually want to work hard? And I think that's the big part. And I think on the work hard part, I think there's also kind of goes into two different ways. I think part of it is, do I actually want to work hard for it? Or am I afraid that if I actually do work hard and I succeed, I'm afraid of the success that's going to come? And then it's like, and personally, this is just, to fully transparent, that's where I'm at right now. I have this opportunity to work on this really amazing product. And I was talking with my mentor about Nessa, and I was like, I don't know if I'm still not sure if it's that I just don't want to, I don't know if I want to sacrifice what I know I need to sacrifice to build this product. Or is it that because there's this piece of me who's like, well, I know that if I do this thing, it could be super successful and I really believe in it. And that's a little bit scary because that's a whole different level of commitment. That's not just me, that's building out a whole product and a company and a team. And I think a lot of people find themselves in these situations. And I think it's so important to be able to recognize, like, is it one or the other? And it's hard because you might not even know. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that, and I love how you are intentional about, you understand the tension within you, that there is a part of you who is recognizing the potential and success, and part of you, there's something in you that is longing for that, and then there is something in you that is saying, do I want to sacrifice? Do I want, how is that gonna impact my life? And this is, I'm sure that you're gonna kind of, I hope that you have, your mentor or your coach where you can tap and understand that for yourself. And it's not gonna be it's not, kind of a quick answer. Those things are not, those kind of crossroads, when we get to a crossroad, that's not a quick answer. However, what I typically, there are a couple of things that I do in my work. One would be always going back to your values, and connecting yourself to your why. Like, why would you have that success? What is your why for that? And what is your bigger vision? I'm sure that, that project that you have, this opportunity that you have, has not come out of didn't find you just out of nowhere. I think you have put a lot of work into and a lot of signals, if you like, out there.
Yes.
Your intention to attract something like that. So that is a product of your work. So now it's really kind of sitting with that, am I afraid of success, or is that going to disrupt my life? And sometimes it's also this fear of success is another way of saying, it's a fear of failure, right?
Yes.
What if this big dream, I don't know how big this is for you, but I found when I got finally on the road to, being working with people, being a coach. Yeah. So when I got onto that road, suddenly the fact that I'm on that road, the fact that this is something that I really, really want to make work, right? That is, that is the essence of, I don't want to do anything else. Right? When something is so big, then there is a part of us that doesn't want to even test that, what if it doesn't happen? Like,
Yeah.
sometimes there's this moment of potentiality that that project, that something can be amazing and successful, etc. There is an element, there is a part of us that is basically holding a little bit back and say, don't spoil it.
Yeah.
Don't spoil it. Let it, it's kind of, do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you resonate?
Absolutely. And you know what's interesting is I have my values here, and I've spent thousands of dollars, by the way, in coaching to
Okay.
understand what my values are, and one of them is achievement. So like it's super important for me to be an achiever, and I always like every time I look at it and I'm like I have it on my board here, and I'm like, oh my, I was like, and then that's what drives me essentially. So I think for me it's more of like fear of failure than anything else. But so I see this a lot in conversations with people I have, and it seems to be a pretty common trend for people, and I think it's so important to be able to distinguish and again understand your values. And I love that part, because if I didn't understand my values, I'd probably just look at it as fear of just like I don't want to do this, da da da. But actually it's more of like the exciting / scary opportunity to achieve, which is super important to me. And so like I need that reinforcement, like I did it, I did it type thing. That's interesting. It's also interesting when I at least in the work that I do, when I work with managers and leaders, that it seems to be they're the leaders that are able to move the fastest. And I believe this as well. Sometimes in order to be successful, you have to just be the fastest, like especially in this day and age, you have to go fast. And when you're perfectionist, it's very difficult to be a great leader. Or that's my assumption. Or maybe you can be, but it's just gonna take a lot longer and be super painful for everybody that's working with you. So thoughts on that?
I love that. I love that. You're spot on. You're spot on. It is hard. That was one of the things that I struggled with, and people I work with, that is the problem. When you are a perfectionist, and just to kind of explain to people what we mean by perfectionism here. Before I knew what perfectionism is, and before I noticed that it was actually hindering me, I thought, like many of us, that perfectionism is about excellence. That perfectionism means that, I'm a person who, I take my time, but I do job well, and I cross the T's and dot the I's, and you can rely on me. And if you give me something, you can, you'll know I'll deliver, and I'll deliver the best thing. Right? So that's what I thought that perfectionism is about. What we are talking about here is not that. It's really, it's kind of more thinking about perfectionist mindset or a perfectionist break that we put on because we are worried that we are not perfect enough. We are worried that when we go out there, first, there's the expectations that we put on ourselves. So a leader who has a perfectionist tendencies would lead a project, for example, and want in his or her head everything has to be perfect. And and what that means is that we can't make mistakes. So perfectionism doesn't tolerate mistakes. Okay, and the other thing, like perfection is, you have a lot of really good experts who have a perfectionist mindset. Why? It's because they have the time. They don't mind taking. They have the time, and they have the energy to go over something as much as they can, or procrastinate to the last minute, and then put all nighter and deliver something amazing. When you have that, you can be a valuable team member. But when you're a leader and you can't make decisions quickly, you can't tolerate uncertainty, you can't tolerate mistakes, because every mistake actually reflects on you, not on you on the project. It reflects on you and who you are as a leader. That's how it kind of lands with you, and you definitely can't go fast. Because you want to get all your ducks in a row before you get before you take a leap. Although I have to say, perfectionism it's not kind of one flavor. right? It's not, for example, my flavor of perfectionism, I could actually take a leap, no problem. Right, I could jump, and I've done it so many times. I jump before even knowing, like, oh yeah, I fancy that. Okay, let's go. Oh, I fancy that. Let's leave this job and go to the job. Yeah, no problem. Right. So that was not a problem. So that was my flavor of perfectionism. Where it tripped me is that I would then set up such high expectations of what I'm, for example, in your case, this project, it's going to be amazing, and it's kind of, it grows in my head even without my knowing, so that when I actually start going towards it, and things don't work out the way I imagined, I'm like, yeah, that's it. It's never going to work. I knew it. I knew it. It's because I'm not organized enough, and because I'm not clever enough, because I'm not this enough and not that enough. Yeah. So that was my flavor of perfectionism, and I see that a lot in my practice. And then you have different leaders who actually kind of pedal really, really hard, and do so. They're the last ones in the office. They're first one in. They will work like weekends, because they want to achieve, to be 100% certain. They may even drive their team crazy, demand the same level of effort, and making sure that checking everything twice. They might be micromanaging people because they want to make sure, because if I'm a perfectionist leader and you're working with me or on my project, then I want to make sure that you don't make mistakes. So it's this intolerance towards mistakes is really, it's kind of limits our growth, because there is no way that you can take anything from 0 to 100 where it needs to go in a straight line. Nothing. Almost like you, the project that you're going to do or potentially do, you can guarantee from this point that you're going to fall on your feet, on your knees a couple of times, for sure. That's something. Failure is guaranteed. The only thing that is guaranteed.
That is for sure. It's that's something that it's always any project. When you start with something, you're going to end up with something else. So that's pretty standard. But I'm curious, for the leaders that are super perfectionists, I'm trying to think of if I luckily I've never really worked for one where, because it trumps creativity. It completely destroys innovation. If you are a perfectionist and you are leading a team in that way, I think there are certain professions that require that, like, I don't know, some kind of finance roles perhaps, right? Like for something very specific, like details, where you really need to be perfect on the details, because it can be, sometimes life or death situations. But I think for a lot of leaders, there has to be some flexibility, because like you said, especially in this day and age, like if your team is not experimenting and failing and trying again in a way that makes sense, obviously, like you need to minimize the risk. But as a leader, that person is really going to struggle to have that creativity and to retain talent, especially with the generations coming in that want to experiment. So when you work with these leaders, like what has been the objective, I guess, because I would imagine somebody who's like super perfectionist, and the minute you tell them like you need to let go, I think the first thing they do is they run in opposite direction and panic. So what are some things that you advise them to consider?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You don't tell a perfectionist that they need to let go or that they need to lower the standards, and that's not the case. It's the way it shows up. I have to reiterate that the way it shows up, it's very different for different people. The biggest cost of perfectionism is the cost that it leaves on you as a leader or as an entrepreneur, as a person, because what happens is that things are never, because it's impossible to have things perfectly, to launch something perfectly, to do anything perfectly. It's that you are never satisfied, and you take it on, you take it badly on yourself, so you're constantly criticizing yourself. And you are constantly, so the biggest, like if I kind of think there are two biggest costs of perfectionism in leadership or entrepreneurship. One is that you are so self-critical. Yeah. So whatever you do, however well you do it, however other people say that was amazing, you're going to look at it and say that just didn't, not good enough. And you, the self-criticism that you experience is undermining that self-confidence and sense of self-worth. And this is possibly one of the biggest reasons that people who come into my practice, that's one of the biggest issues. So what that means, that like you are not feeding your self-worth because you are too critical. You do not take the achievements on, they don't feed you, and then you start stagnating, and of course you start, you kind of hold yourself back. The other thing that you do, you will have I worked with some extremely high achievers who will basically kill themselves on the job. So you have this other thing that people experience a burnout, because they will do everything they will drive themselves hard, and they will work other people hard. And they might it's not that they are not going to be creative and stuff. It's just that the cost of trying to do it in that way is extremely, extremely hard.
As you're speaking, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, you did ask me a question, like, what do I suggest instead? So it's not about lowering standards. It's about developing a self-compassion. Right. So and by developing self-compassion, you are increasing this tolerance, a window of tolerance for mistakes. Because somebody with perfectionism, like, they would look at, they would, and I have leaders like this, they will look at the rest of the team and say, yeah, of course it's okay for, Elena to make a mistake, and it's okay for Sanela to make a mistake. That's, of course, everybody makes a mistake. But when it comes to me, I can't tolerate it in myself. Right. So you also have this, like, I worked with leaders who are extremely good towards other people, but extremely harsh on themselves. So one of the ways of doing it is to develop this awareness. What is perfectionism? How is it showing up in your life? As I said, like, there are millions of flavors, right? We have all unique expression. You can never know whether I have perfectionism. Like, rarely. You have some, like, some things where it's really obvious, but rarely it's, oftentimes it's not. So it's really about understanding perfectionism hides something. It's protecting something. And we need to understand, what is it protecting? And that is, if you kind of drop down everything and go to the center of it, to the crux of it, it is protecting some sense of not being enough. And you work with that. So you never work directly kind of, let's lower the standards. Like, yeah, of course it's not going to work. Like, my whole sense of self is linked to that. So that's just rubbish advice.
I think, first of all, I feel like I'm getting a personal coaching session, so thank you. But I also think that for a lot of people, it's very relevant. But as you're speaking, so I think that there's a part of just the self-criticism. I struggle with it, but also it drives me. So, and I think, and I meet many people that are the same way, because I'm not a perfectionist, but I can care less about what I do right. I want to know what I can do better. But I'm not a perfectionist by any means. I'm more of like, let's just get this done and then improve the next time, versus like, it has to be perfect. Like, I'm the opposite of a perfectionist. But what also does the self-criticism, and where, I've learned, is to just be grateful for where I am. But I have not, and I don't know if I want to quiet down the self-criticism part. In a way, I mean, obviously it's pretty healthy, I guess, in a way, but like, my level of self-criticism, I think, is semi-healthy, because it drives me. because if I were like, there's a lot of advice out there that's like, well, you should just, you know what I mean, like be easier on yourself. I don't function that way, and I think a lot of people don't. And I think, again, it just drives me. It drives me to be like, okay, next thing, and the next thing. It keeps me going, because otherwise, I think it's just my personality, and a lot of other like kind of overachievers that tend to be that personality where it's like it's never good enough, but not in a sense of I'm not good enough. It's like, I know I can do better. I know my potential is not there yet. You know what I mean? I'm telling you, I'm having a whole coaching session with you now.
No, I love it. I love it. Okay, so you said something really crucial there, and that's I could do better. It's not that I'm not good enough, but I can do better. So
Mm-hmm.
when you separate doing from being,
Mm,
right, and you're kind of saying, I can improve, I can get this to I can achieve more, I can get more, that is doing. That has nothing to do with your self-worth.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Then kind of having, and I don't know what self-criticism looks like, but it's not, if when it's linked to doing, the question is, what can I do better, right?
mm-hmm,
When it's linked to being, which is a self-criticism that says, I am not enough, I am wrong, so if I did something wrong, I am wrong. When it goes straight to the essence of who we are, so we say things to ourselves like, yeah, you're just stupid, you'll never make it, you're not uh, good enough, clever enough, quick enough, organized enough, whatever. When our failure, which is inevitable, when it goes straight to who we are, and we talk to ourselves about what we've done
mm,
in terms of who we are, that self-criticism is never a good idea. And there is
mm-hmm,
tons of research that says, that motivating yourself by saying to yourself, I was once on a street where I live, and a woman was, she was running, and she just passed by me, and I just heard her going, "Come on, stupid, run faster! You're stupid, run faster!" I was like, dear Lord. So she was, genuinely, like, she was kind of, she was saying, a couple of swear words and stuff, but it was directed at her,
mm-hmm.
like, you are not, you useless something or other,
Mm-hmm.
run faster. So that is never a good idea.
Yeah.
That is the kind of stuff that we are, we see it everywhere. Okay, so there's something about where we see that, like, people say bad things to themselves and about themselves, and that is supposed to motivate us. But actually, research shows that that takes away, it does not give us the confidence that we seek and
Mm-hmm.
self-worth that we seek. But this other thing, where we're actually saying, yes, I could do better,
Yeah.
kudos to you, go for it.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's super helpful. And yeah, and I love it that it's like it's not that you're I think the self-talk is important, and I think that's where we can all do better. It's like that self-talk, because it's so subconscious, and it's such
Mhm.
a whisper sometimes, and you have to like catch it and be like, wait a minute, what did I just say to myself? No, 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 no. And you have to go back and correct it. But it's so hard, Sanela. Like, it's so hard I know it's hard because it's hard for me, and I have to keep catching the whispers, because I know how detrimental your self-talk is. It's You absorb it, you become it. It's awful. It changes your whole life for the worse, or for the better, depending what self-talk looks like for you. But yeah, that's super, super powerful.
Mm. It's I my issue was exactly that I had a voice in my head who was horrible to me,
Mm,
horrible to me. And it would take any opportunity to tell me how horrible I was when, when I quote unquote fail, which is essentially, things didn't work out the way I
mm-hmm,
imagined. um, and that is the main reason I gave up perfectionism. Because when I went to get trained with in the work of Brené Brown, maybe you know that on courage and vulnerability. I did not go there to say, oh, I want to get rid of perfectionism. I went there and I said, I really want to be braver and I want peace of mind. I was sick of being kind of going on this roller coaster of being extremely, sort of backing myself to do all sorts of things, jumping in. And then at the sight of anything that goes wrong, my self-critic would go so loud that I would then go on and wrestle with it, trying to get myself back online or while doing things. It was exhausting. It was properly exhausting. So that is the reason, I had to learn self-compassion. I had to learn to say, when you say talk, be good to yourself. I had to learn to talk to myself like I would talk to you, like I would talk to my clients, like I would talk to my friends. I don't need to call myself names. I don't need to, put myself down. I now kind of that's my job, to have my own back. When I coach clients, it's your job to have your own back. And at the same time, go for excellence, seek for whatever you want to do. Those two things exist, because compassion can be fierce, which is like, get your butt in and do stuff. And it could be compassionate, which is gentle, which is like, I know that something that you deeply cared about didn't work out. And I know this is hard for you. And the moment of you sitting with that and, tending to yourself, that is what gives you courage. That is what feeds you. That is properly what feeds the self-worth. The other stuff, not so much. So
very interesting. Very interesting. If somebody wants to work with you, or, I'm sure you create a lot of content. I know we recently connected on LinkedIn and I see some of that, but where else can they connect with you or reach out to you?
Yeah. So I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So Sanela Lukanovic on LinkedIn. I think you'll have to put that in the notes.
I will do that.
My name. And self-dom.life is the place where to find me. So self-dom, self and dom, which means the essence of oneself.
Love it.
That is self-dom.life is where I also, you can coach, we can do group programs, you can do my courses, all sorts of things in there.
Amazing. And the last question I ask all of my guests, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
I wish people would kind of throughout the day stop and just check in with themselves. What is going on? How am I feeling? And what do I need? And that is, it's two questions. I'm cheating. But those two questions would lead to us being more responsible for our own energy, for our own triggers. And then when we show up in meetings, in our relationships, we can own our stuff, so that we do not kind of walk around and offload onto other people and blame other people for the stuff that's going on within us. So yeah, those two questions, please.
Sanela, thank you. Thank you for making us less self-critical. Is that how you say self-critical? Whatever it is, less self-critical, right?
Self-critical,
and, and less perfectionist in a way that makes sense.
Yes.
In a gentle way. And thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.